Very few franchises mean as much to me as Resident Evil. Resident Evil 2 happens to be my favorite game in that series, so this remake I've been very nervous and very excited for. And now that I just got done finished playing it, is this trip back to Raccoon City worth taking, or is this just an absolute butchered remake? The Resident Evil 2 remake here is a third-person perspective survival horror game that is a retelling that is very much familiar, but also very different from the original RE2. The game has been built upon the Resident Evil engine that we first saw in Resident Evil 7, but gameplay this time around is back to that third-person camera perspective that we saw in more modern Resident Evil, starting with Resident Evil 4. The game looks great. From the cutscenes, the gameplay, the gore is fantastic. There's a lot of really cool effects. Destroying zombies and breaking them apart with the various guns is very satisfying. I do wish there were a few more models for zombies, but other than that, all the creatures, zombies, lickers, and all the other monsters, bosses, are great in this remake. If you're someone who's played a lot of the more modern Resident Evil games, even Resident Evil 7 with the different camera perspective here, it still feels right at home with the other games. I was able to jump right in and being able to run through and blast through enemies using Claire or Leon. The inventory system returns, you can increase it a little bit as time goes, finding a few extra pouches and all, but this is very much one of those games where you have to manage and decide what you want to have on you and what isn't necessarily important to keep on you at a given time. I love some of the added additions to the gameplay that are from other Resident Evil games, not necessarily RE2, like the gunpowder system making a bit of a return. It's a little bit different than RE3, but cool to see that back. Also returning from Resident Evil Remake for GameCube is the defensive weapons, like you can use your knife when a zombie grabs you and stab it into them, instantly knocking them back so you prevent yourself from taking some damage. It's cool though that the knife gets stuck in the zombie and once you kill them you can pick the knife back up. But one negative, the knife breaks in this game. One concern I had was they were going to go too action heavy with the remake, but thankfully there are plenty of puzzles. You're constantly having to find various items to put together and solve things in order to progress through the game. And they use a great map system in this title that updates constantly with all kinds of little info, so you know exactly where you've been, what's in each room, and what you still have to do in that room, or maybe items that you weren't able to pick up, so you can go back and grab maybe health items that you couldn't pick up earlier because you didn't have the space. You still have two campaigns, both Leon and Claire's. There's enough differences between them that makes both well worth playing through, even more so than with the original as far as differences were concerned. They're much more significant in this remake than they were in that original. You also do get those segments during each person's campaign where you get to play as a different character, either Ada or Sherry, and those elements have been changed up a lot as well, with Ada's being more of a puzzle thing. You have more of like a hide-and-seek kind of thing with Sherry as she's trying to get through the areas. I don't usually comment on things like voice acting, but I will say that the voice acting was one of my few minor gripes with the game, and that may be mostly just because I have so much nostalgia and so much love for Allison Court as Claire Redfield, that not having her in this remake really did end up dampening some of the experience, and I could say the same thing without having the more modern version of Leon, Matt Mercer, being used for that role. I think both of those cases, missing those main voices, ends up taking RE2 down just slightly. If you're already very familiar with survival horror games, the more modern Resident Evils, you will probably breeze through the titles, especially if you play on easier difficulties right away. I highly recommend boosting it right up to the higher difficulties if you're a vet of the series, and even then it took me around 5.5 to 6 hours on my first time through and significantly less the next time, but if you're more unfamiliar, I can easily see this game taking 8 to 10 hours in order to get through one campaign the first time. Though you have multiple campaigns, multiple difficulties, and a bunch of unlockables, so there's plenty to do here. They put a lot of attention and detail into the game. You still have the third and fourth survival modes. You can unlock, thankfully, an unbreakable knife. You have infinite ammo and a few other things that keep me playing and are still playing through this Resident Evil 2 remake. I'm sure there's a few hidden things I haven't found yet either. From the technical side of things, the game didn't crash on me, but I did have some minor glitches here and there. There were some texture issues, loading stuff with like doors sometimes would be weird. I had a time where a zombie grabbed me, I put a grenade in his mouth, shoved him through the door, and then when I fired at the grenade, it blew up, but the doorway itself kind of closed at that same time, negating, I guess, the damage I was doing via the explosion. So there is a little bit of glitchiness here and there, but it was nothing that usually took me out of the gameplay experience. Resident Evil 2 Remake is available on PS4, Xbox One, and PC for $59.99, and of course it does have a Platinum trophy. Overall, as far as a remake in the modern style of Resident Evil, this is exactly what I was hoping for with RE2. There are some minor problems here and there, a couple of minor changes that I may not necessarily love, but there was so much attention to detail, Easter eggs, unlockables, and the gameplay is just so much fun that the Resident Evil 2 Remake is very solid. And even if you don't like the modern Resident Evils, I know a lot of classic fans will never like the modern games, and that's perfectly fine. I do, though, recommend at least giving this one a look. Overall, RE2 Remake was a lot of fun, and I'm going to be giving it an 8 out of 10. That's going to wrap up this review, though. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.